Oh hey, what's up gentlemen and ladies? I was just sitting here thinking about the Fabula Nova Crystallis, as I often do, and have you guys ever thought about the fact that Tabata actually directed 2 out of these 3 games, which is kind of interesting, especially because Nomura directed none of them, even though the FNC was originally pitched as his project. But you know what's even more interesting than that? Crisis Core. That's right, another Tabata game, but it's really weird that Tabata is 3 for 3 on killing off his main characters. It's like giving this guy any project will almost guarantee that the protagonist will be dead by the end of it. Why even play Tabata games anymore when you already know how they're gonna end? That being said though, let's talk about a Tabata project that, despite his predictable nature, I would admittedly still really like to see get made. Our story begins all the way back in the year 2006. That's right, we're busting out the atlases for this one, guys. E3 in May, Square Enix announces Final Fantasy XIII, but not just Final Fantasy XIII, 3 Final Fantasy XIIIs, aka they needed some kind of excuse to put a Roman numeral on 2 spin-off games to make them look more legit, so here's what they came up with. We got the actual Final Fantasy XIII for PS3, Final Fantasy Versus 13 also for PS3, and then Final Fantasy Agito 13 being made for mobile phones. And what better man to put on the mobile phone project than the guy responsible for Square's previous mobile success of Before Crisis? Hajime Tabata it is. Fast forward a couple years and turns out that mobile games suck. Square wanted a little more out of Agito 13, so they moved it over to the PSP, where Tabata would also eventually go on to direct Crisis Core and The Third Birthday. But would you look at that, it looks like Final Fantasy XIII has made it out of development hell. Let's see how the fans react.
Trash. Absolute trash.
And then you have stupid fucking games like Final Fantasy XIII. Like, what the fuck were you assholes doing the entire fucking time?
Because it may force Square Enix to realize that they should stop pooping out low-quality, no-sense-making RPGs.
Yeah, it's like, how many chapters are you in? I'm on like chapter 9. Okay, well when you get to chapter 10, which is just another 10 hours, you get to Pulse, and it opens up and it's like open world. I'm like, oh, you mean how the game should have been the whole time? Okay, yeah.
This is not quality video gaming at all. It is fucking garbage.
The game's playing itself, John! The game's just playing itself, John! The game just... John!
We chose the wrong Roman numeral to stick on 3 titles, didn't we? So how about we just erase those parts there and like just change the titles? I'm sure that nobody will notice, right? It was at this point that Final Fantasy Agito 13 was changed into Final Fantasy Type-0, and as a security measure, just in case, they also decided to trademark the name Final Fantasy Type-1 and even Type-2. But there wasn't really any plans to make a sequel for Type-0, at least not initially. You never know though, because that's what they said about Final Fantasy 13, and well, we all know what happened there. Final Fantasy Type-0 released on the PSP in 2011, and everything was great. Fans really liked it, and overall it seemed like a success and a very fun experience. Unless you didn't live in Japan. Yup, Square Enix decided to pull a good old Square Enix with this one, whether it be the PSP's decline in popularity in the West, or the devs just not thinking that it would appeal to a non-Japanese market. Whatever the reason, Type-0 did not release anywhere but Japan in its initial release, and for a while, it seemed like all hope was lost. But when we least expected it, right at a time when it seemed like we would be doomed to have to watch gameplay on the game online instead of playing it ourselves forever, it seemed like there was one small glimmer of hope. Off in the distance, there it was. Some big news having to do with Hajime Tabata, the Fabula Nova Crystallis, and a game getting moved over to PS4. Could this finally be us getting Type-0? I know I cannot wait. Oh, never mind. It was just Final Fantasy 15. Wait! Oh, and would you look at that, Type-0 is also getting ported to the PS4 and released outside of Japan. Hell yeah. Now, Final Fantasy Type-0 HD on the PS4 released in March of 2015, and it came bundled with a demo for Final Fantasy 15, which, let's not lie to ourselves, is the main reason that like 90% of the people who bought this game bought it for, but still. Fans played Type-0 and it was a very enjoyable experience, but at the end of the game there was a special cutscene, one that was new even from the PSP version. This cutscene showed us the main character of Ace seemingly dying and then being engulfed by this flaming figure and, as one would say, rising from the ashes like the phoenix that represents his kingdom, as a frickin' samurai. Most people took this as a teaser for Type-1, or Type Next as fans have started to dub it. However, there was a few things that were weird about this scene. For starters, the setting and outfit looked inspired by Japanese culture, which isn't really very true to Type-0 itself, and this is especially weird because spoilers for Type-0, the entire party dies at the end of the game, so why would Ace be alive and then die again only to be brought back? Well, we gotta remember that this game is part of the Fabula Nova Crystallis, which means that its universe is the same as Final Fantasy XIII's, and just in case you guys need a refresher for what happened at the end of Lightning Returns, Lightning kind of reset the universe and created Earth. At the end of the game, we see her in a train station in France where she goes on to become a successful Louis Vuitton model. I wish I was kidding when I said that. But if this is true of 13's universe, then it must be true of Type-0's as well. Could Ace actually come back in a sequel to Type-0 taking place somewhere in Asia? And I say Asia because it doesn't necessarily have to be Japan. It could be somewhere like Hong Kong? Hong Kong? That seems really random, you might say. Oh, but does it? In 2015, right before the release of Type-0 HD, Tabata went to a launch event for the game in Hong Kong of all places where he talked about a few things. Now, Tabata had previously expressed his interest in working on a sequel to Final Fantasy Type-0, however, nothing really official had been said up until this point. However, this Hong Kong event was the one place where we got the closest to official news regarding Type-1. During this event, we got 7 pictures and concepts from this, quote, project. The first 3 seemed like just plain old concept images, one depicting a horseman in an alley, the second with a village that had a weird monument castle type thing in the background, and the third was a man with these mechanical looking wings standing in front of a waterfall. These all look very interesting and all, but where stuff really starts to get weird is in the last 4. The first 2 are pictures straight from the added bonus ending of Type-0 that I mentioned earlier. Keep in mind that these were shown off at a launch event before anybody had played the game, or at least played the version of the game that had this scene at the end. The third image actually had a picture of Ace's face from that scene, I kid you not, superimposed next to a real-life picture of Hong Kong. Not like a render or a town that looks inspired by, no, like a legit picture taken with a camera of Hong Kong. But you might be thinking, oh, maybe this was just some kind of like advertisement, right? Like, you know, having a picture of what they're showing off and then the city that it's taking place in. I'm sure that they didn't actually want to portray that Ace is in real life Hong Kong, right? Well, how about we take a look at that final picture of this 3D rendering of Ace that isn't cut from that scene at the end of Type-0 of him standing in a balcony overlooking the Hong Kong skyline. Again, this is a real life picture, by the way, still. Somebody had to take this picture and then they posed the model so that he would look like he was in the same angle as someone legitimately standing on that spot in the picture. Then they placed him over it and erased the stuff that went in front of him on the shot. What a weird thing to do. What the hell were they gonna do with this game? But you might be wondering, why Hong Kong though? Well, it's worth noting that Type-0 hasn't been the only game released in the Type series of Final Fantasy games. In 2014, Square Enix made a follow-up named Final Fantasy Agito, a reference to the game's original name, and that was released on mobile phones just like Agito 13 was originally intended to. There was plans to release this game in the West and even to have a PlayStation Vita port called Final Fantasy Agito Plus, but this never really went anywhere as the game was quickly discontinued later that same year. But in its place, Square Enix wanted to pull a Final Fantasy XIV with this one and have a reborn version of the game titled Final Fantasy Type-0 Online, which is a terrible name because it sounds like it's an online mode to the original Type-0, even though it had different characters and didn't take place at the exact time as Type-0, so the team eventually changed it to Final Fantasy Awakening. An even worse name in my opinion because they just dropped the Type-0 name altogether. They could have just called it like Agito Online or Type Online, but nope. Just went with generic old Final Fantasy Awakening. Eventually this game released on mobile phones, however it did not release in the Americas or Europe or Oceania, heck it didn't even release in Japan. You wanna know where it released? Have a guess. It's China. Look, Hong Kong is technically a part of China, okay? The game then, shortly a couple of months after, released in all of the disputed or technical Chinese territories of Taiwan, Macau, and yes, even Hong Kong. Then it came out in India, Singapore, Malaysia, and then most recently, earlier this year, Australia. What a weird and very random bunch of countries to choose. If I've got any Australian viewers watching this video or anybody from any of the other countries that I mentioned, then let me know what the game's like if you've played it. Supposedly there was a PC version of the game announced ages ago that we haven't heard of in like forever, but I doubt that anything will come of it. Just what a weird game. All of these things that Square is doing with the Type or Agito series are really interesting, and I guess only time will really tell what comes of them. which actually brings us to now, the present day. Soon after this, Tabata got really busy with Final Fantasy 15 to the point where he really didn't have time to work on anything else. He said in interviews later that he was actually working on a project prior to being put as director of 15, but that he had to abandon it to focus his attention on that. He did say that he'd like to return to it someday, though most likely after FF15 was done. This could have very well been Final Fantasy Type-1, however, 15 ended up taking a lot longer to develop than what Tabata initially expected, and even after the game was out, the team and Tabata were kept on board working on updates and DLC for the game. And when Tabata finally got out of working with 15, he actually left his team and got his own new studio within Square Enix called Luminous Productions. You might have heard of it. And before anyone suggests that maybe they could be working on Final Fantasy Type next, Tabata already said that this new team is going to be working on AAA non-Final Fantasy titles, so we can pretty much forget about that anytime soon. It's a real shame that this project was just kind of pushed under the rug and forgotten. It seems like Tabata was interested in working on it and may very well have even started, but then bigger projects just got in the way, and now it doesn't seem like we're going to get Type 1, at least not anytime soon. But anyways, the most that we can do for now is speculate and talk about what we'd like to see from this game online, and oh, would you look at that, the entire story of Type Next got leaked! Apparently your full party comes back to life at the beginning of the game and they're all dead again by the end. Oh, god damn it, Tabata! Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Shout out to my homeboy Planner Walk for pledging on Patreon. If you guys would like to pledge, it really helps me out. Links are in the description. You guys already know the deal. And either way, I guess that's all that I have for you guys today. I hope that you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to blitz that like button, subscribe as always. Stay tuned, Kupo.